Hey, welcome back to the second episode of this mini-series. In this episode we will implement the collectibles and the inventory system. So, when the player walks on an item, it will disappear and it will be stored between inventory. So, stay tuned. First of all, select the image with the background and set the pixel per unit to 16. Filter mode to pointing no filter and at least compression to none. Then click apply and open the sprite editor. Now go on Slice and select Grid by cell size, modify the parameters, apply and close the tab. Now open the tile palette and create a new rectangular tile map. Then create a new tile palette. For example, I will call it background and save it. After that, just drag the image in the tile palette we just created and select a folder. With the tile palette you can create easily the background, so now we can start drawing the level of the scene. Take your time and set the background as you want. If your player is under the background, don't worry, you just need to set order in layer to 1 and also add the tag player to the character. Now we can drag in the scene a collectible, so first we need to modify his order in layer to 1 and then we can rename it. After that, we should add a box collider to both the collectible and the player. Obviously, don't forget to set its trigger to true for the collectible collider. After setting the scene, we can create a new folder called inventory and inside create a new script, call it collectible and open it. Delete everything inside. The first thing we want is to detect when the player walks into the trigger box. For that, there is a built-in function to Unity that lets us detect when something has entered the trigger. The function is called onTriggerEnter3D. Inside, we want to check if the collider that entered the trigger belongs to our player. And for doing that, we need to get the script character controller from the player. Then we create an if statement that if we get the script we increase the numseed variable that we will create later by 1 and below we destroy the game object of the collectible. Okay, now in the character controller we create a public int variable called numseed. So if we save and test the game, we are able to destroy the collectible. Now it's time to create inventory. So create another script called inventory and open it. Delete again everything inside and remove also monobehavior from the class definition since we're not adding this script to any of the game objects in the scene. Instead, we're going to create a new inventory that lives on the player. The first thing that we need to do in our inventory is set up our slot object. So create a new public class called slot inside of our inventory class. Then we need to think about what we need the slot to keep track of. So add the variable count. This keeps track of how many items are in the slot. Instead, to keep track of the maximum allowed, we should create another input variable called maxAllowed. The last thing we need now is to keep track of our item type. And for doing that, we need to return in our collectable script and create an enum called called type. Let's add two types to the enum, none and eposet. An enum is a set of name constants that have an underlying numeric type. They start with 0 and increase by 1 following the definition of the text order. Now let's give to our collectable a type, so create a public collectable type variable and name it type. So, back in our inventory script, add a public collectable type variable again called type. Next, let's create our list of slots in our inventory and set it equal to a new list. Now we have a list of slots, but it's an empty list. So we need to set up the list before we can handle adding anything to the inventory. If we have no slot, then we can't add anything. So let's set up this list. We need to create a constructor for inventory. A constructor is a function that gets called when the object of the class is created. So when we create our inventory, it will call the constructor and set up our slot list. Let's also pass in a parameter and call it numSlots. Inside, let's use a for loop and look for the number of slots our inventory has. Then, in the for loop, we can create a new slot and add it to the slots list. Now, when our inventory is created, it will have all the slots it needs, but we need to set up the slots when they get created too. So let's add another constructor to the slot class. Inside, we're going to set all of our variables to the default value. So, set the type to none, the count to 0 and the max allowed to 99. Now that we've got our inventory and slot set up, let's add a way for our player to add items to his inventory. Let's create a function called add. Let's also give it a parameter of collectable type. Inside of the function, we need to search our inventory for any items that are the same type as the item we're trying to add. Let's use a for each loop to do that. Then inside the loop we can check if the slot.type is equal to the type that we passed into the function. If it is, we should check to see if we can add the item to the slot. In the slot class, under the constructor, create a public bool function called canAddItem. Inside the function, we should check if the count is less than the max allowed. If it is, then we can return true and let the inventory know that it can add the item. Otherwise, if the count is equal or greater than the max allowed, we should return false and let the inventory know that the item cannot be added to this slot. Back in the add function of the inventory, let's check to see if the slot can add the item. If both of these conditions are true, then we can add the item to the slot. So let's create a function in the slot to add the item in the slot class by creating a new function of type, so public void add item. This function will take a parameter of the item type that we're adding. Then inside, let's set the type of the slot equal to the type that we were passing in and also add the 1 to our count. Good. Now back to the add function, let's add the item to the slot. So inside of the if statement, we can say slot.addItem and the type that we passed into the add function. Now let's add another for each loop that loops through all the slots in the slot list. And then inside we can check if the type of the slot is none. If it is, then we can add the item to the slot and return. There is one more thing that we need to do for seeing the inventory in the inspector in Unity. We need to make the class serializable. So above the class definition add a system.serializable and also add one above the slot class as well, so we can see all the slots in the inspector. Now open your player script and delete numSeed variable, then add the inventory to the player by creating a public inventory variable. Now we have to create a new inventory when we start the game, so inside the awake function let's create a new inventory by writing how many slots we want it to have. I'm going to write 10 for example. For now, save the script and open the collectable script. You will notice that we now have an error. This is coming from the line where we were incrementing the numSeed variable. Since we deleted it in the player script, we can no longer access it. Therefore, let's replace it with player.inventory.add. Don't forget to set public the inventory variable and write our collectible type. Now the error should be resolved, so save the script and go to Unity. Take a look at the collectible in the scene. You will see that it now has a variable called type. Click on it and select apple seed from the list. Save and hit play. When you walk into the collectible, the behavior in the game should look the same as it did before. The collectible should disappear, but now if you click on the player and check the inspector, you should see an inventory variable. If you open it, you should see the slot list, then expand the list to see all the slots. Lastly, expand the first slot. It should be of type apple seed and have a count of 1. So, in this video we implemented the inventory and the collectibles. See you soon, bye!